Adonai Marabotarai, Rabim Damim Alai, Rabim Uverim Enafshi, and Yeshua Talo Elohim Selah. A song of David when he fled from Absalom. Shalom. That means peace in Hebrew. It's also an informal greeting, so it's equivalent to like the English hello. The more formal greeting is Shalom Alechem, which means peace be upon you. And if you're greeted with that formal greeting, it's most appropriate to return the greeting by returning the peace. In this way, we turn around the greeting and say, Alechem Shalom, upon you be peace. So I want to begin with a prayer that Yehovah would open each of our eyes and hearts to the wonderful, beautiful hidden things of his Torah. So please join me now. Most righteous Father, we humbly come before you and ask you to open the eyes of our heart, Father. Cause us to see the wonderful and hidden things in your Torah. In your holy name, Yehovah, and in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we thank and praise you. Amen. So in this class, I'm going to start out by just explaining the format. So there's basically going to be a 4-part lesson each week. And then throughout the week between these video lessons or audio recording lessons, depending how you're downloading it, we'll also have a set of ongoing assignments, which basically consists of handwriting and vocabulary. We've also got some worksheets that I put together to make it a little bit fun and to cause you to think about things in different ways, because that's how we learn best, is when we put things together and take them apart and put them back together and take them apart till we really know them inside and out. So that's what we're going to do with the Aleph Bet. If you follow the course schedule, which you can download on yihior.org or on the Days of Awe Discord server, you can view that as well. And if you follow that course schedule, you're going to be actually reading the Hebrew Bible by the end of the month. So you'll have gained enough fluency by the end of the course that you should be able to pretty much read the entire Hebrew Bible, and you'll definitely be encountering new words at each juncture because we won't have time to read the entire Tanakh during the course of this class, but we will get really strong footing, and it is my prayer and hope for each of you that you will go on to take a more advanced Hebrew course. Maybe I'll be ready to develop that as well at that point. But for now, I'm a student along with you, and I want to disclose that at the outset. I am not a, Hebrew teacher that has 20 years of experience, or a linguist that, translated the Dead Sea Scrolls like Nehemiah Gordon. I'm just little old me, and the Father's put it on my heart to learn Hebrew, and over the last few years, I have taught myself Hebrew. My husband and I have done that together by reading the Tanakh. And the method that we used is really simple. It was very effective for us, and I believe it will be very effective for you as well. So basically, we are going to learn biblical Hebrew by reading the Tanakh. So let's go ahead and get started. Fortunately, my being as far off grid as I am means that my internet is terrible. So I had wanted to do live streamed classes, but for right now, we're going to be doing a video format like this, and we'll have the live discussion forum taking place on the Discord server. So if you haven't gotten over there to Discord to sign up yet, please do go ahead and do that. It doesn't take but a moment. It's much quicker and less invasive than a lot of the other sign up social medias. And it's, I really encourage people in these times we're living in to withdraw your support from big tech. You don't think you're giving anything, but data is the new currency, and they're getting your data when you're participating with any of those big tech social media giants. So I encourage you all, as a form of social protest, as a way to make more holy your social media experience, just exodus. Let's have a mass exodus from social media and go on to platforms that are more conservative friendly and can be more spiritual focused. The Discord server called Days of Awe, which I've mentioned, is where we will be having the live Q&A sessions. So I will actually be online live, so we can talk about the lesson each week. That happens on Sundays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, so you should start your lessons around 6 Central Standard Time. Go ahead and go to timeanddate.com to convert those times for your local time zone, because I'm terrible at that. And we don't have daylight savings time in Belize, so that complicates it a bit further. But do go ahead and find out what your times are and make it there for Discord 7 p.m. Sunday nights, because you won't be sorry. We're going to have fellowship, discussion, and you'll have a chance to be able to ask me questions live. So it's a very important component of the class if you want to get the most out of it. So on the Days of Awe server, you're going to notice there's several different areas, and the area that pertains directly to this class is going to be called Biblical Hebrew Study Hall. So the Biblical Hebrew Study Hall channel is where you're going to find all of that Q&A happening at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sundays. So as I said, the format of the course goes like this. You have the lesson, which you're going to watch here on the yihior.org site. There will be various links. Sometimes there'll be files or songs to download that go along with the lessons, but it'll all be there. And the most recent lesson will be at the very top of the stream. So it makes it very easy for you to find it, as well as to go back and review any lessons that you want to go back and review during the week or later in the course. After you've done the lesson, then we're going to meet up at Discord and have our Q&A and our discussion and our fellowship, and lift each other up in prayer and encourage each other, because this is a whole spirit class. This is not just about teaching your mind Hebrew. This is not a secular class. If you want a secular Hebrew class, go somewhere else. We are very much focused on Yehovah here. We have a delight for Yehovah, and everything he delights in, we delight in here. So come and join us for that. And then afterwards, on your own, you're going to have 2 notebooks for this class. Very simple. One graph paper notepad, and that's just going to be a simple graph paper notepad. You can have the one that flips up, you can have it flip open, it can be various sizes, but pretty much the standard size is best. And that way, what we're going to be doing, don't get the super micro one, obviously, just your standard graph paper will be perfect. And it works really well for Hebrew because all of the square script characters fit very nicely in squares, hence the word square script. So the other notebook you're going to be keeping is just going to be your own Hebrew lexicon. And that's actually going to be a notebook where you are going to be developing your vocabulary. So as you learn new Hebrew words through the lessons and through our Hebrew words of the day and the Discord server, you can add those into the lexicon. And then by the end of the course, then you'll just have this book full of words that you've learned. And it'll be a great springboard for further learning for you. So moving on. One of the most exciting things to me about this is I recently discovered that one of our lesser known founding fathers, at least I didn't know a lot about him, admittedly, I'm not a history buff, but William Bradford was an English Puritan colonist, and he came over here and he was on the Mayflower. And so he was the first governor actually of Plymouth Colony. And he apparently was an avid Hebrew student. Actually, on his memorial stone on Burial Hill in Massachusetts, he has a Hebrew inscription that basically reads, Yehovah is the helper of my life. So, and it actually has the full vowels, which is really exciting to me to see the full vowels engraved in stone from the 1600s. And so, yeah, I am just super excited that we are following in the footsteps of some of those first Puritan settlers that came and formed this great country. They were avid Hebrew scholars, so it was something the Father had obviously put in their heart. And the thing a lot of people don't realize, the irony is they were, Protestants, but they completely rejected the King James Bible in terms of its value as a translation. They wanted the Hebrew so that they could actually get to the heart of the scriptures. And so the Father has put that same flame and desire in many of your hearts, and I know that's what's brought you here. So congratulations, and thank you for following the Father's calling and leading, and may He lead us ever onward into greater and deeper blessings. So as I said, I am not a native Hebrew speaker. I'm not a scholar that has gone to, the University of Jerusalem. I am just a little old me, and I'm here to learn and to share along with you. If you have ideas, corrections, if there's typographical errors, feedback about the class, how we could make it better, easier, just please feel free. I'm a friend. We are mishpacha here, in fact. That's Hebrew for family. So be family and feel welcome to bring any concerns or questions or any kind of ideas that you have about the class, because we're all learning as we go together. So to recap for the class flow, on Sundays at 6 p.m., you're going to be watching the lessons here on yihior.org. Then you're going to jump over to Discord for the classroom online Q&A and discussion time. And then you're going to go sit down somewhere quiet at home and write out the Hebrew Aleph Bet or do other forms of copy work. It's going to start with pretty much just copying the Aleph Bet, Aleph to Tav, every day. And then after that, you're going to put into your lexicon the words that you've been learning in the daily verses. Now, to begin with, we're just going to focus on the Aleph Bet, so there won't be any daily verses, but when we start with the daily verses, they will be posted along with this video or audio files for the lessons. So you'll see it all there together in one place and make it super easy for everybody. So yeah, that's it. In less than 2 to 3 hours a week, you will be reading Hebrew by the end of the month. And by the end of this course, which is going to be 22 lessons, so 22 weeks long, I think you will have enough fluency to be able to read, if not the entire Tanakh, big parts of it. And you might stumble a little bit, think of yourself as a kindergartner starting all over, but it's going to be a fun journey, and it'll be well worth the effort, I promise. So many of you know I love music, so I'm also providing with this first lesson a Hebrew Aleph Bet chant that I composed. It's very simple. And I'll just go ahead and quickly sing it for you, and then you can download that as a separate audio file to listen to while you drive or while you're studying, and especially while you're copying your Aleph Bet. But I want you to learn that so that as you're copying, you can be telling yourself Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, right? And I actually kind of two chants. That one that I started has no musical melody to it. Some people are easier with just rhythm, and some people like music. So go ahead and listen to that as often as possible. And like I said, especially while you are doing your copy work, whichever one you prefer, the chanting or the musical one, go ahead and be listening to that as you're writing it out. So that way you're always catching that pattern. So there are a few basic things I want to go through about Hebrew that are really important to learn before we even begin. One of them is that, and some of you here might already know these things, but just bear with us. We're all on a little bit different level, perhaps, here in this class. So the first thing to know about Hebrew is, from an English perspective, it's backwards. Of course, since it was first, maybe English is backwards, but in any case, it is written and read right to left rather than left to right as in English. And the other thing to know about Hebrew is all the letters in the entire Aleph Bet, and there are 22 of them. All of those letters are consonants, okay? So the vowels are not letters in and of themselves, but instead they're called nikud, and they're little vowel points, little dots, dashes, and lines that are around the Hebrew character, mostly above or underneath, sometimes kind of inside or beside, and you'll get to know those. And there's a few markings like that that aren't exactly vowel points, but we'll learn about those as well. So Hebrew is the oldest language, and it is the language our Creator spoke existence into with. It is the language Adam named all the creatures in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, with. And it was the language that our Elyon, our Most High's word, was first recorded in. So it's a super special. It's in Hebrew, it's referred to as the Holy Tongue, or the Holy Language. And so the Lashon Kadosh. And remember, before Yehovah divided the languages of man at the Tower of Babel, they all spoke one language, and we know that must have been Hebrew. So it's only logical. Anyway, moving on. Now, there's something you need to understand about Hebrew. Hebrew is a living language, and what I mean by that is there's sort of these multi-dimensional layers of meaning within the Hebrew characters themselves. So each Hebrew character actually has a phonetic sound that it makes, It also has a numeric value, and it also has kind of a conceptual or pictographic meaning that is associated with it. And this is different from English, because in English we might associate apple, for example, with A because of the sound. But in this case, these are associated concepts, and they don't have to do with the sound that the letter makes, but they have to do with what the letter represents and which words it appears in. And this is one of the proofs for the fact that this language was given to us by the Most High. It is a divinely inspired and created language. Okay, now there's something a little bit strange for English speakers about the Hebrew alphabet. There are two letters, and remember I said they're all consonants, and we're going to focus only on the consonants first. We're not going to worry about vowels right now. We're just going to learn about the consonants. But the first two letters in the alphabet that I'm going to introduce you to are Alef and Ayin. Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. It actually, in the Paleo Hebrew, looks like an ox's head, and it a little bit preserves that. You can kind of see some horns, in the modern Hebrew as well. So as we said, the Aleph is the first letter in the alphabet, and when we first meet Yehovah, we meet him as Elohim. In the very first line of Genesis, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim. And that means in the beginning created Elohim. And it goes on to state that he created the heavens and the earth. So the Aleph has a concept of leader or strength. Ayin is a letter that originally in the Paleo Hebrew looked like an eye. And so fittingly, the meaning for Ayin, the pictographic meaning, is associated with sight, with seeing, with the eye itself, but also with like the broader context of seeing or perceiving, to heed something, to experience, to watch, those kind of things. And another interesting modern note is this new Omicron variant that they're trying to beat us into submission and fear with. Is the Omicron in Greek actually comes from the Ayin. And so the first thing we had was the Alpha variant, and we had the lockdowns with Passover. And now we have the Omicron variant, and I am foreseeing some lockdowns coming in the near future. And I think they're going to use that as the excuse. So I hope all of us know that we have nothing to fear, because there is no fear for the ones that fear Yehovah. But moving on, these two consonants are special because they don't really make a sound. And what I mean by that is they are kind of like grammatical placeholders. So they have a function in Hebrew grammar that we're not going to really get into and dwell on, but I'll just shorten it and say that every Hebrew letter needs to have a vowel point with it. So that's why we even have a silent vowel called shiva, and it's just a function of Hebrew grammar. However, these vowel holders often do hold vocal vowels as well. So it might make an ah sound, it might make an s sound, it might make an a sound. And we will, like I said, not even focus on the vowels for right now, but I just want you to bear in mind that Aleph and Ayin are the two letters that actually are placeholders and don't have their own constant sound. They change depending on which nukud are surrounding them. So get to know those two. Interestingly, Aleph is the first letter in the title for our creator, Elohim. And the Ayin is present in the name of Yeshua, our Messiah. So I find that interesting, that those are the two kind of set apart letters in the Hebrew alphabet. It is a divinely designed language that fits together in multiple ways, and multi-dimensional layers of meaning can be found within each word in the Hebrew Tanakh. And we will get into that a little bit later in the class too. But for now, I just want to give you kind of an introduction to what that concept is. So like, for example, the title Elohim. Each of those letters has sort of an individual meaning. Aleph, as we said, is the first letter, and consequently, it also kind of has this meaning of firstness, right? It is associated with Adonai. It is the beginning of his name, as we're looking at. And it is also associated with a leader role and strength, and indeed the ox, as we discussed. So that letter, if we look at it as meaning Adonai, and then we look at the next letter, Lamed, it means tongue or language. And again, there are a variety of meanings that we could ascribe to it related to tongue or language, but we're going to just look at that one for right now. So Adonai's tongue, and then we have He, which represents behold or reveals or to show. So if we use the word reveals, we have Adonai's language reveals. And then we have the Yod. And the Yod is representative of the hand, particularly the hand of Yehovah. But it also represents kind of grasping or taking action or doing deeds or work. So Adonai's language reveals deeds. And the final letter is Mem. And Mem is this letter that kind of means chaos, the seas. It kind of has all of these associations with water and chaos and mightiness and massiveness. So what's more massive than our Creator, right? Adonai's language reveals mighty deeds. And like I said, each of these letters has kind of a little variety of meanings. They're all related concepts. For example, we talked about Aleph, meaning leader, strength, first, Adonai, etc. Ox, which is a strong animal, often used to lead or pull a plow, etc. It also means gentle, because we need to have gentle strength. Our leaders need to be gentle. It's very important when we're leaders to be gentle, and it's hard. Remember Moshe in the desert? He had a hard time. But our Creator, he is so gentle with us, isn't he? He's so patient. Now, I can tell you, it may be a coincidence, and some of you say, oh, well, you could derive any meaning. You can't really derive any meaning. But I will tell you that every single word, and I've done quite a few of them in my studies, that I have broken down in this way, the sentence, the phrase, the concept that comes out of breaking that word apart into individual letter meanings relates directly back to the word, always, every time, never fails. So I find it really interesting. Now, I would caution you against, this is not like, we're not going to go into mysticism and say that we're going to add to the word of the Most High and say that our interpretation of these meanings, because they are somewhat vague, they're not as literal as the words themselves. So we don't want to build doctrine off of it. But what we'll see is that it reinforces the doctrine that's already there. So that's not even going to be an issue. But it's really fun. And later on, like I said, we'll get into actually decoding some of these words as part of our assignments. And so you'll have fun with that. For me, it's kind of like my Sudoku. I kind of think it's fun. I don't like Sudoku, by the way. I'm terrible at math. But I like doing these with these Hebrew words. So another way we could break down the same word is the first action, behold, Yah's hand is mighty, right? So same word, same associated meaning, set of meanings, and another statement that's also relevant to Elohim himself. How awesome is that, right? Okay, so we have some of the basics nailed down. Right to left, all consonants. Now let's talk about the Nakud briefly. So the Nakud are the little dots and dashes and points that probably are where you start to go, what? I can't do this now. Because instead of just reading in a linear way, you kind of have to do this with Hebrew. You're kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down. And isn't it interesting that that's kind of like the bell curve of life? So again, we have this living language that we have to be dynamically decoding. And it's easier than you think. Once you get used to it, you more start to kind of piece together the letters with their Nakud as sort of a unique character. So, when you have the Sagol below the consonant instead of the Tsere, you see it as a different sound. Initially, they're all blends. But don't be intimidated. You're going to get it. It just takes time like anything, but it's going to happen quicker than you think. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and put up some charts now to show you some of the Nakud. And just so you can familiarize yourself with what they look like around the letters. We're not going to delve too deep into the sounds right now. We're just going to look at these charts together briefly. And then we're going to go back over into the Aleph bet. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've got two charts to show you. The first one we're just going to go quickly through. And I just want you to see how the Nakud look. You see their dashes, their dots, some of them are below, some of them are above. Sometimes they occur with a yod after the consonant. And in this case, we've just used an Alef to show you. And the other chart will actually just use a square, an empty square. But the important thing is just to familiarize yourself with how these nikud look and how to recognize what they are. So the next chart I want to look at is actually going to be the chart that you're going to print out, and we're going to go through this just briefly. So here you can see I've named the vowels for you. So we have the patak and the chatef patak, the kametz and the chatef kametz. And again, we're not going to worry too much about the sounds they make right now. We're just familiarizing ourselves with what they look like and what they are called. The tzere and the tzere yod, that's when it occurs with the yod, after the vowel, rather after the consonant, excuse me. The sigol and the chatef sigol, the chirek yod, and you're going to be tempted to say chirek and chirek yod. It's not ch, remember it's a chet, and if you can't say that, you can say hirek, okay? Kibbutz, the shurek, the cholem, and finally we have this crazy silent vowel, and that really is a function of Hebrew grammar, and we'll get into that later, but it's called the shiva. And the shiva is simply a silent vowel. It does sometimes occur as a composite shiva, and you'll see it along with the other vowels. And if you look back at the chart again, you'll see where it occurs with those other vowels. It actually does make a slight sound. It's called a hurried sound. That's what chatef means, is hurried. So it can make a sound, but when it does make a sound, it almost always occurs with one of the other nikud. And we'll get into some of the more details later about that, but I just want you to, at this point, familiarize yourself with what they look like, and we're not going to worry too much about sounding them out right now. We want to focus on the actual consonants first. Okay, so we're going to begin now with the Alef bet. The Alef bet has 22 consonants. As we discussed, 2 of those consonants are silent unless they have the nikud markers indicating that they should be pronounced as a vowel. When there is no nikud, they make no sound. If there is a nikud, they make whichever sound the nikud implies. And we will discuss the nikud in a little bit, but let's just go from top to bottom. And we're going to first just read from top to bottom, and I want you to look at the Hebrew letter as I'm saying the name for it, rather than the transliterated name, the character name beside it. Let's look at the Hebrew letters as we go down. So going from top to bottom, I want you to notice that some of the letters, the bet, the pei, and the sheen, all occur as 2 different forms. The first one is going to be in parentheses, and it doesn't have any little dots with it. Those dots are not nikud. They sometimes can indicate a doubling of the letter. But again, we are going to get into that later with the dagesh lene and the dagesh forte. For now, I just want you to recognize that the bet can also be a vet. When it has the little dot in it, it remains as a bet. And when the dot is absent, it turns into a vet, making a V sound rather than a B sound. Again, if you continue down, you'll see the pei has 2. It has the pei and the fei. The pei is the character that has the little dagesh inside it, the little dot inside of it. And when the dot is absent, then it becomes fei, or an F sound. Continuing down, the other letter that this happens with quite often is the sheen. And the sheen has a dot above the little arm on one side when it's a sheen, and on another side when it's a seen. So when you see that little dot, you want to pay careful attention. When it's on the right hand side, it's a sheen. When it's on the left hand side, it's going to be the seen. So that is something to note. So keep that in mind. It's something that's easy to miss, and if it is a sheen, it makes that SH sound blended, and if it is a seen, it just makes the S sound. So those three are special in that way. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. They all pretty much sound like the letter that you hear at the beginning of their name. So let's start at the beginning again with Alef, and we're just going to go down and look, and we've got Alef, and then we have Vet or Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet. And I want to stop here a minute and discuss the chet sound. It's a special sound. It is not a sound that occurs in English. For most English speakers, it's very difficult at first, but in time, you'll find yourself saying it quite easily. Practice makes perfect, as with anything. It's kind of a soft clearing of your throat sound that you make. It's a very guttural sound, and you make it in the back of your throat. Don't worry if you can't pronounce it right away. Just kind of say it as an H sound. And when you're alone and not embarrassed, go ahead and try to cough up that chet. Think of it as like you're trying to get a little bit of mucus. I'm sorry, it's kind of gross, but it's a good parallel that you're trying to get something out of the back of your throat. That okay, so that's what you're going for, is that chet. Okay, and blending that, you don't want it to be so hard that it's like chet. You want to kind of gently blend it into your other consonants when it occurs and into the nikud that it occurs with. But one of the easiest words to recognize this letter in, that a lot of people know, even if they're not Hebrew speakers, but they have some familiarity with Hebrew roots, is the word chaim, right, which is life, or chaye, and that word starts with a chet, but we will encounter other words as well. Choshek, as we get into Genesis, is darkness. And that also begins with a chet sound. So moving on from chet, as we move down, we see tet, yod. And yod is interesting because a lot of the words in Hebrew that begin with the yod began being translated as a J sound later on. So that's how, little by little, Yeshua became Jesus, and it's interesting to see how that actually occurred, and Yehovah became Jehovah. But we're not going to get off on a tangent too much, just to acknowledge that sometimes that yod in English was rendered as a J later on when it began to be translated into English. So moving down from yod, we have kof. And kof is one of the first letters here that we have that has a sofit or final form. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters that have a sofit or final form, meaning that when they are at the end of a word, they appear differently than when they are within the word or at the beginning of the word. So they're special in that way, and that's why I've highlighted them in blue. The kof, all of them, in every case, it mostly just stretches out and kind of stretches its tail down, with the exception of mem, which does something a little bit different. It kind of just closes itself off and removes its crown, is what I like to say. But as we move down from kof and we see the two forms, another note I want to make here with the kof is that it can occur with a dot inside of it or without a dot inside of it, and that will change the sound it makes. When it occurs with the dot, it will just make the K sound, and when it occurs without the dot, it actually makes a sound very similar to the chet. So you'll most often see it with the dot, but that does happen sometimes. Moving on down, we have the lamed, mem, and mem has a final form and a standard form. Nun, and then we have the hanging nun, or the nun sofit, the final nun. Samek, and it looks like an O, so it's kind of confusing, particularly in this block script. Sometimes it's a little more square than that, but it's this closed square, similar to the mem, but shaped a little differently. And that samek makes an S sound, not an O sound, so remember that. Then we have Ayin, one of our letters for today, and that is one of the vowel holders, one of the silent letters. Remember, it will take on the sound of whichever nikud occur with it. Then we have the fe and the pe, and again, that's whether it has that dot or not tells us whether it is a pe or a fe. The tsadi, both of these both have a final form as well. And the kof also makes a K sound, just like kaf and kof also make the same sound. And those are the only letters in Hebrew that both have that same sound like that. Resh, sheen, and seen, and then tav. And tav is the final letter. So now we have gone through the Aleph Bet from Alef to Tav. So that is the conclusion of our lesson Aleph, Shi'ur Aleph. We have learned about the Aleph Bet. We have learned about Nikud. To review, we have learned that Hebrew is read from right to left versus left to right in English. And we have learned that all 22 letters in the Aleph Bet are consonants. 2 are silent and take on the vowel sounds of the nikud that are pointed. And the rest of the vowels are represented by the nikud around the consonants. So that about wraps it up. We're going to jump on over there to Discord so that we can discuss what we've learned. I'm just going to go ahead and play one of my psalms while we're waiting for everybody to gather there. You can enjoy the psalm here on Yihi Or while you're waiting for people to gather there in Discord. And I will be over there waiting for any kind of questions, comments, feedback, or just to chat and fellowship with you guys. And I really look forward to getting to know each and every one of you. I want you to know that the Father loves you and He has drawn you close to His heart. You are so special to Him, and that's why He wants to give you this holy language to be blessed by it. There is so much blessing wrapped up in the original Hebrew scriptures. I cannot emphasize enough how special it is and how many more deeper levels of meaning you'll be able to extract from the Hebrew than you can get in the English, because there's always something lost in translation no matter what language you're translating it into. So congratulations on being here. I commend you for following the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, in learning Hebrew. These are special days that we're living in, and we're about to see some pretty awesome things take place. So with that said, I look forward to seeing you over there at Discord. And take care.
Never just me. Our delight is in Yehovah. We meditate on His Torah, and we shall be planted like a tree by the waters, whose fruit ever prospers. And we shall be planted like a tree by the waters, whose leaves never fail and whose fruit ever prospers. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach b'atzah, reshaim u'derech chatayim lo emar. U'Moshe etzim lo for His delight is in Yehovah. Ki em betorat Yehovah chefto, and he shall be planted like a tree by the water, whose fruit ever prospers. והיחד שתו על פגורי מים אשר פריו ייתן בעיתו. Not so with the wicked, not so. They like dust on the wind are blown. Lochen harashayim ki em kamos asher tidepenu we meditate upon His love, and we shall be planted like a tree by the waters, whose fruit ever prospers. Yes, we shall be planted like a tree by the water, whose leaves never fail.